Hello, I'm Sharona Justman. I'm the co-founder of the Israel Conference. We're dedicated to the business of Israel. We're in a special time right now where the business of Israel has been slightly interrupted. So we're talking to entrepreneurs and business people throughout Israel to get a sense of how business is going and their ideas on the future. We're very fortunate today to have with us Yaacov Ben-Yaacov. He's the founder of Play Anywhere and Catch Media and a number of other companies with his awesome team. And I'd like to learn a little bit more about Yaacov Ben-Yaacov with you today. So, hello, Yaacov.
Hi, Sharona. Thank you very much for having me today. And thank you for letting us have time with your audience. My
Beautiful.
background is I was born in Israel, but grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and came back at age 17 and did a ROTC type program called Atuda Academite, where I studied at Jerusalem College of Technology, computer science, and robotics, and then worked in that building command and control systems in the Army for 5+ years. And and then in '93, we started a company called Picture Vision, which invented the ability to share pictures over the internet, as silly as that may sound today, as well as send pictures to cell phones. Took the Japanese company public on NASDAQ Japan, and then sold the US company 20 plus Xing our investors' money. And after that, I sort of jumped to the other side and was a VC for a while, and then went back to my entrepreneurship. And my brother was at News Corp working on interactive TV systems, and we started a company called Catch Media that works closely with the content industry to make sure that content owners get paid as their content gets consumed, which has obviously been a hot topic lately.
That's quite an impressive background to you, along with your brother Boaz, to have created these ideas a little bit one step ahead of the market, being able to slightly see around that corner as to where the market is going and designing technology to capture not only the clicks on behalf of the producer, but also make it possible for the audience to be highly interactive. Could you elaborate a little bit on the interactivity side?
Sure. So, I think what we saw early on was that consumer, just like in photography, it's not a paper, film, and chemical business anymore, but people consume hundreds, if not thousands of times more photographs and take more photographs than they ever took before. Today, that paper, film, and chemicals is turned into Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and other things like in TikTok. Um, and as we saw that going to happen in the music, video, book, and game world, um, in physical distribution or traditional distribution, the control of royalties back to the content owners was in some ways easier because there were some very common distribution channels and those were controlled. And so royalties flowed back. But as we moved into a hybrid or a digital world, um, the number of use cases just mushroomed. Consumers would consume hundreds times more content. We just saw on Thanksgiving, Black Friday's game on Amazon that they put QR codes up so you could, with one scan, buy a TV and so on and
Right.
so forth. So we're seeing interactive activity start to happen. And what we saw, and really we in Warner Media saw, is that there was an opportunity to put the impulse purchase or impulse opportunity in front of the consumer at the right time. But that required setting some rules around it on how folks were going to get paid. So if you take a sports game, is it owned by the league, the broadcaster, or the pay TV operator? If you take NBA, it's on ESPN and TNT, but they don't really have a direct relationship with Comcast and with DirecTV. So how do you make that all happen? And that's where Play Anywhere came about. It basically said, let's understand what the consumer wants. So we put the 10 things that Sharona would want to see, whether that's buying a jersey or ordering a pizza at halftime, and then put the 10 things in front of Yaakov that he would want to see. And at the same time, make sure that any money comes in goes to the right stakeholders. We're doing that in interactivity with that same Catch Media engine, but we're also doing it with AI rights, which have been in the news lately, meaning as you train models, that licensed content goes into the model. People query, use Chat GPT or Dolly or whatever it may be. And if you ask for a picture of SpongeBob holding an American flag and it creates it for you, well, the owners of SpongeBob and probably Betsy Ross should get some credit for that.
So that's quite complex to track all the recipients of the royalty, the payers of the royalty, the turnstile associated to that royalty, and whatever deals they've got going. You must have
Right.
a massive group of folks who are thinking through all the math and
So
testing
we
it
are.
and being prepared for a
Yeah.
defensive audit.
So we're very blessed with a wonderful product, business, and tech team. The tech team are serial entrepreneurs coming out of the voice over IP space, the e-commerce space, myself and some of the others in the media tech space. But also we have Pete Scott, who's one of the co-founders, who was the VP of Innovation for 15 years of Warner Media and then Warner Media Discovery. We have others that were chief marketing officers of the Washington Capitals and folks who led distribution of things like Formula E in Latin America. So we've been blessed to have folks who have the connections, and then part of it is making it simple. How do you make this complex web? Right? Most people go to a cash machine, they take out cash, they don't think about all the complexities that happen between
Right.
the banks, internationally, converting currencies. I just landed in Madrid this morning, pulled out 100 euros, and it said to me, do you want this bank to convert it or the other bank to convert it? And that's just a simple example. When it comes to rights and what broadcasters are allowed to do, and when you start to talk about interactivity, where it's usually the end device that's facing the consumer. So think about it. If we're watching on a DirecTV or Comcast box, or we're watching on a Samsung TV with an app, it's that app or it's the Comcast box that actually can put the interactivity in. But yet they may not be the ones that have the deal with the league or with Survivor or any other unscripted TV or the Magnolia Channel, right, with do-it-yourself stuff, and you want to sell those items. So what we do is we take that complexity, we simplify it, and the best way to think about it is we basically have three parts to our engine. It's compliance. It means let these guys decide if there's a tie game and there's 3 seconds left in the NBA game and it's a playoff game, please don't do anything to the screen at that point. Please let the consumer watch the game. But if it's the middle of the first quarter and you want to overlay a question or a prompt to bet if you're in a legal betting state, then go ahead and do that. We're working closely with folks like the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, who have very stringent rules about what you can do, how you can use the Olympic rings. And those are complexities that hopefully the consumer never sees. To them, they get the pleasure of, with folks like Amazon and ourselves, being able to click a button and just buy that Jennifer Aniston sweater.
Right.
So that's the type of things we're doing. And then behind the scenes, we're making sure everybody gets paid. And we see a world where the screenwriters, the directors, the actors shouldn't have to go on strike again, because you'll have real-time clearinghouse systems where there's full transparency across the ecosystem, across the world, and they'll be able to see that. We've been blessed to sign a number of major deals in the world. Most people in the United States don't think of soccer or football, as we call it here in Europe, as one of the major sports, but 2.8 billion views per year are viewed on the Spanish soccer league called La Liga. They have over 100+ million viewers, something like a Super Bowl that happens twice a year when Real Madrid plays Barcelona. And we've been blessed to have a deal with them through the end of 28. We recently announced a deal with Dolby so that in sub-second delays, you can actually watch the game almost in real time. And for betting, that becomes extremely important because you don't want to bet on something that already happened.
Is
So
this
that's the
really a
type of
game changer in the sports vertical
I
of
think it's I think it's sports and general entertainment. It's not just sports. We'll see it happen in sports initially, but then we'll see it go into. We're talking to folks like the owners of Big Brother, so that you can go ahead and vote. You may be able to win prizes there in certain countries. You may be able to enter sweepstakes. I think these are natural tendencies. Consumers like when they can socialize with a community that has an affinity, and that affinity for one person may be watching the New York Rangers, and another person's affinity is watching the new episode of a new series of a TV show, or it's a do-it-yourself show, or You may laugh, but at nights I watch these shows where they look for cabins on a lake, and so if the consumer can participate and feel part of that, especially the Gen Z who's got that phone in their hand all the time, and they can feel part of, in a sense, creating the aura of the show. I think that's
Mhm.
a tremendously important thing for the industry as well as for new revenue. It's no secret that the new NBA rights are coming up, and the last 10-year rights were sold for 25 billion, and their target is 75 billion. So if the broadcasters are going to pay that much, they need to have a way to make more money. And I
Well,
think, when LeBron dunks that third dunk, if you give somebody the opportunity to get a signed LeBron jersey, I think there are going to be a bunch of people bidding on that.
well, you must have an incredible dashboard of analytics that is helping to demonstrate the value if to go from 25 million, three times to 75
Yes.
million, for example, for those rights to
So we,
substantiate that position.
yeah, I mean, we've tracked over 1 billion unique users consumption of content across music, books, and video,
Mhm.
and we've settled over 1 billion B2B clearinghouse transactions between content owners and content distributors. So we have very sophisticated dashboards, but the key is making them simple so that a author can see what they're owed, a publisher can see what they're owed, a studio, a distributor can all each see what they're owed. And I think the other thing that I didn't mention, which is really important, is brands are going to demand that they receive addressability to certain audiences. And to date, most of the brand association is not done to a content context, but rather to a demographic. And I
Right.
think what we're going to see more and more is you're going to see association of, for example, if you're watching in Japan, MLB, and Otani hits a home run for the Angels, well, Otani, the dollars he can bring in for sponsorship are unbelievable in Japan,
Hmm.
and probably 1/20th of that in the United States. If you're watching a La Liga soccer game and an Argentinian player scores a goal in Argentina, that's worth a fortune. So the other thing we know how to do is look at context and regionalize that context, whether that's language, whether that's brand association, keeping to rules. So you're not promoting betting or beer in the Gulf, for example. And we do all those things.
So you're conquering the sports world and entertainment world, but it sounds like you could be addressing this to many other verticals anywhere where there's a relationship between the deliverer of content or services, even, and the consumer. So give us some context. You're not a startup; you're a real machine that's happening. Who are some of your customers, and
So
what's your next vertical that you're going to address?
sure. So some of our customers range from Dentsu Sports Agency, which represents 15 different leagues and tournaments worldwide, like Copa America globally, like the Olympics, the Paris 2024 Olympics across Asia, um, La Liga, as we've said, all the way down to the American Cornhole League, which you may not know, but 500,000 people watch the finals of that when it's on ESPN. So
Amazing.
we range across those and across broadcasters. And you're going to see probably within the next quarter, you'll see general entertainment going out there. But I think if you look a little bit into the future, what you're going to see, and maybe this is important about the times we live in today, I think you're going to see consumers' opinion of how media portrays things change, meaning they're going to want to participate immediately in
Yes.
feedback to the media on whether they believe what they're saying is believable and dependable or not. And I think the notion of having a poll um, and having immediate feedback, not just on the social networks, but actually presented on the screen on the broadcast, is going to become common.
Is
And
that
that's going to
something that
force
you could do today with
it is, and you'll see us start doing that. You'll
and
see
with
us start
news? There's
with news
always
as well.
such doubt as to whether the news is telling us the correct information at the time they're telling it to us.
So
Is that
yeah.
can
So I
play
think you're going to
anywhere
get to a
influence
point
that?
where it's not only comments on a social network a Twitter feed or another feed, but you're going to actually see it show up on as polls live, and media outlets are going to be held accountable to, and that works for you or against you because depending on what public opinion is, it can skew reality as well. But I think
Yes.
it's always good when the public can participate, and definitely for the Gen Zs who want to engage and don't want to sit back and just sit there for an hour watching the news like we used to watch Walter Cronkite, right?
This is a really big deal for information consumption and action that we take. So,
It is.
with that in mind, how are you growing? Since these are a lot of areas to address, and you need specialists
Sure.
in some cases to service
So,
those verticals. What do you need to grow, and how are you getting
so,
there?
so you need three things to grow. First of all, you need the right people who can cut the deals, who can close the deals. You need to simplify the message so that the education of the market that an ecosystem can happen is out there. And we've been very blessed with partners like Dolby who are recognized standards in the community, and
Hmm.
that, in my opinion, gives us and the notion of sharing money credibility. I think that's the second thing. The third is partners, and I think since we're talking about Israel, WSC, which is recognized as the world leader for highlight clips of sports, is a partner of ours, and you're going to see us rolling out with them the ability to go ahead and watch those highlight clips on your phone in real time while you're watching a regular broadcast, not even digital. And those will be sponsored, and revenue will flow back to everybody in the ecosystem. So partnerships like that are obviously very important. And as you know, we're at war now. I've got three sons, a son-in-law, two son-in-laws, a daughter-in-law, and three nephews, just in my immediate family. Most of them, either in the South or in other areas, in harm's way, as they say. And we've seen, folks in their units be killed and had to go to funerals. So I think you take a company like WSC. I think they've got to have close to 100 people out right now. And I think what's interesting that you see is in the companies, everybody else sort of puts in an extra hand to
Right.
try to make sure that the customers are serviced. I have yet to hear a customer that's not serviced because of the war. Quite the opposite. I think there's tremendous enthusiasm by the employees to help each other, no matter where they are in the world, and no matter where they sit on the political spectrum either. And so, we've seen a tremendous amount of support from our customers as well. Um, I will tell you something funny. I was approached last week and wanted to know. They asked me if I wanted to have negotiations with the Iranian broadcasting for the Olympics, and I said I'd pass on that one. But for the most part, um, even with the folks out, we are able to do that. We're out. We're in a growth stage. Obviously, like any growth company, we're raising capital.
Okay.
That's tough at this time. I know there are some dedicated funds that we haven't approached that are there to support Israeli companies or Israeli associated companies, and we may talk to them. Um, but combine that with the state of the market as a whole. Um, I think it's a tough time to raise capital. So we'll be raising ours as a bridge round to a Series A that we'll do towards the end of 24 as we
And
see.
what's the amount that you're targeting to raise?
So we'll bring in about 10 million at this stage. It'll allow us to get to the point where we've got significant revenue flowing through by towards the end of 2024. The Olympics will be in July. We have other major events coming up and rollouts, and you'll see us with tens of broadcasters, leagues, and general entertainment shows. So you'll see real revenue flowing to the content owners in the tens of millions already, and that's
So with that
that's
kind of
awesome.
proposition, it sounds like you just need a little bit of money to help support your growth of your team as almost a lag amount because you'll
Yeah.
be receiving revenues that are quite significant
Sure.
in
It's
the
really
year to come.
twofold. It's one of it is really just to fortify the balance sheet because as you cut deals with the NFLs of the world or the FIFAs of the world, They obviously want to see that you have a balance sheet, not
Yes.
necessarily to take it, but they want to see that you're there and there to stay. Um, these rollouts take time. They're moving big organizations like the ESPNs of the world. Um, and so that's one. And two is to continue to expand our business development and operations teams so that we can support all of these. If you think about it, somebody like La Liga has close to 100 broadcasters worldwide. So as they start to come on board for
Yes.
any
It
little
becomes
company, it
exponential.
becomes a lot. Yeah.
And that's
So
very impressive. So Play Anywhere is a phenomena that's happening and it's going to be literally a game changer.
yes,
So
and I think yeah.
you
Sorry, go
mentioned that
ahead.
some of your staff and family members are heavily engaged in the war. Of course, we all are from various distances, but you're right there in the front. Tell me what your company or your family have been doing with
Sure.
respect to the war to support the state of Israel.
So I think you have basically three levels of how it affects you. One is the immediate effect that we have people in reserves, like our graphic designer who is in Shem. So not only is he in reserves, but we don't hear from him for weeks at a time. So you can imagine that can make things fun when you want to try to access, some of the files that he had worked on. That's sort of there and right in your face, and I think everybody sees that. The second piece is an emotional piece, right? It's when three kids in my son's unit were killed. Um, in the practical sense, it's going to the funerals, going to the shivas, but it's also affecting you. I mean, my son didn't find out for 3 weeks because he was deep in Gaza and they had no phones. So that hits you, and you have to be able to get through that, and the family has to get through that. All the kids came home. I have 5 kids and 6 grandkids, so they sort of all piled into the house. I think my wife sort of took a leave of absence from her social work job and became a full time kindergartner. So that creates its own. My son's got my car, so that's sort of tangible. But the other thing is the whole country, as well as fantastic support from the world. Donations have come in. I try to explain to people it's as if the U.S. would call up 30 million reservists within 48 hours. We called up close to 400,000 reservists within 48 hours, and the Army needs help. The country needs help. We also have hundreds of thousands of people who had to leave their homes in the South and in the North because of rockets and because of infiltrations. So, just think about you have a family of 6 who's now in one hotel room and left with no clothes, no books,
Right.
nothing that they had. And so one of the things we're also doing is making sure to collect donations, buy equipment, whether that's for the soldiers or for the people who were ousted from their homes, and try to give them each what they need. Anything as simple as beef jerky to the soldiers, which has a lot of protein, so they can just put it in their pouches. As silly as that sounds, to bulletproof vests, all the way to coloring books for little kids and clothing for kids whose houses were burned down, right, in the
Yaakov, is there
attacks
a
of October.
particular organization that you're funneling your energies through to make this happen? I know that
So
there are many organizations, but is there a particular one that you're tracking with?
so my brother in the first days of the war was approached by 62 units that either are on the northern or southern border, okay, needing thousands of pieces of equipment. We've been able to supply hundreds with the donations that we brought in. So we have a number of suppliers, both
What's the name of
nationally.
the what is the name of the organization
So
that
we've been very blessed. Tatsala International works with us very closely. They don't take any fees. They basically set up segmented accounts so that if we need to get 500 baby grows for babies who came out of the south or the north, we bring in the donations. for that purpose. They pay the bill, and it gets delivered right to the people. So,
Fantastic.
they've been fantastic about that. They've been very, very helpful. I think it gives people a lot of comfort that they know that it's going through a official 501c3, and they're getting a tax credit, and that there's no fees being taken on that money.
What is
And
your
obviously,
outlook for what's for the months to come? We've had some release of some of the 240 hostages. Of course, we want 100% of all the hostages returned. So weeks to come, we hope that they'll come in groups and ideally family members and ideally as unharmed as possible.
yeah.
What's your outlook for Israel's economy, Israel's society in the near term?
So I'll start with the optimistic side. The optimistic side is I was in Riyadh in March for the Italian Super Cup, hosted by the Saudis and the Italians. Wore my kippah, walked into the hotel. Like the chef came over to me and made sure I had food that I could eat. Um, and the mood there was that there will be peace with Israel. So I think MBS, as he's called, Mohammed bin Salman, set the stage over the last 5 years to get the public ready to have peace. And I think, you know, the folks who don't want that to happen always try to disrupt at the last moment.
Right.
So I think that's the future is a future where the Middle East will flourish, and I think it will flourish without some of the parties being there, Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran. If it doesn't turn around, I think they sooner or later just won't be there.
Wow.
The Yemenis are going to have to decide whether they want to go on the side of evil or good, and each country will have to decide that. I think you've seen tremendous cooperation between countries in the world to get, another 14, I think, were just released hostages. Um, it's very difficult to see men, women, and children, in captivity for any country, definitely for a small one like ours. Everybody knows somebody, so it's somebody's cousin or somebody's second cousin or something like that. But I think the real goal, we could go on whether we need to get rid of Hamas or Iran, but the real goal is that we should be able to live in peace here in the land. And people forget that hundreds of thousands of Gazans and folks from Judea and Samaria come and work daily in Israel, and they're part of the economy, and they make 5 to 10 times more on this side of the border than they do on that side. And I think they're going to have to choose whether they choose that they want, as they chant some of those protests. I always laugh when I see the protests while I cry. I say, I bet if you surveyed the people and asked them if Israel was a vegetable, fruit, or a country, unfortunately, we may get an even distribution of answers. I'm not sure the protesters really know what they're talking about. But, when anybody talks about from the river to the sea, it doesn't leave much room for anybody else. So I think the average person wants to go to work. I worked with Notre Dame University in the United States to open a software engineering school for East Jerusalem Arabs. So in the same breath, if the Gazans don't want to live in peace, I'm happy to make sure they're not there in order to, so that our folks, both Arabs and Jews, whether it's the folks from Rahat that were killed or the folks from Kfar Aza that were killed.
So overall, you see that this will come to an end, and Israel will be able to resume elevating the area, handshakes with with countries like Saudi Arabia, and create once again some economic prosperity for those who choose to participate.
So I would say here's the good news. It's not so good for those being paid in dollars, but the dollar shot up, went up to over 4 shekels to the dollar, but now it's back down to 3.7. So we have a very strong economy here in Israel. But yes, I think it's going to take time. These are not simple problems we're dealing with. We still have hundreds of thousands of reservists in reserve duty in harm's way. Um, and this is going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. I think, the perfect example people give is it we didn't find bin Laden in a day, right? It took time. Uh, and in hindsight is 2020. How long should you stay there? What happens the day after? I think politicians want to, and President Biden and the Congress have been unbelievably supportive, as well as the European countries, unbelievably supportive. We've received support from the world that we've never seen. We're also seeing anti-Semitism at a level that we've never seen
Right.
in the last 30 plus years. As a kid growing up in Atlanta, I remember the Klan. You would hope you wouldn't see those type of things. I saw videos from Brentwood actually last week of what went on. It brings out the worst in people, and unfortunately, anti-Semitism is mostly ignorance. That's what most hatred comes from. So I think we, as Israelis and Jews, have to educate people, teach them a little bit about history on all sides, explain to them that we don't go in and bomb hospitals. It would have been very easy for us to just blow up hospitals. But, I'm an officer in the Army, and we're taught that if we walk into a room and there's a terrorist standing behind a grandmother, you walk out of the room and you don't shoot the grandmother. And that's what our troops do for the most part. I'm not saying there aren't mistakes, but, I don't know any other army in the world that developed a knocking system to drop a missile that doesn't blow up on a roof so that the people know that the missile's coming and can get out of the building. And I would say, but the hope is that the same way we develop unbelievable weapons and cybersecurity, I think we pray 3 times a day for peace. So that's really where our eyes are. It's so that our people live in peace, on all the people that live here in Israel, and hopefully peace with our nations around it. I was in a cab once in New York, and a Syrian driver said to me, what do you guys want? Don't you understand that from when we drink our first drop of milk from our mothers, we're taught that you're the devil? I said, listen, we just passed from New Jersey to New York. And if you didn't know, you wouldn't know that you passed between them. I said, I'd like to be able to drive to Damascus and not know when I pass the border. So that's, I think, the goal.
That is a great future vision that we should be able to bet on using Play Anywhere technology. Yaacov Ben-Yaacov, thank you so much for spending time with us, giving us a window of knowledge as to what Play Anywhere is doing, and some ideas on how we can be helpful to the state of Israel, and your outlook for the future. We should drive easily between societies and learn to appreciate and live while we appreciate the differences in culture and differences in style, but doing handshakes in business that is healthy for all involved.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sharon. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Yaacov. Shalom. To see more conversations with extraordinary Israeli entrepreneurs, visit theisraelconference.org.